now onto the buy low, sell high section. So we've passed our bread and butter and we're into new territory here. Haven't done this before. But who are your QBs in this section? Just maybe say whether you're buying low or selling high, because that could cause some confusion.
Yep. So buy low quarterback Teddy Bridgewater.
Teddy
only scored 10 or maybe 12 against the Falcons, which does not look good on paper. But he did come out of the game for, I think, a full quarter or most of a quarter.
Yeah.
And going forward, he still has elite weapons in Anderson and DJ Moore, and CMC is returning this week. And he's genuinely pretty good. So I think he's a huge buy low because his average doesn't look that good. So if you can get him for cheap, that'd be a steal.
Yeah, and the game script pretty much always suits Carolina.
Yeah.
So he's definitely a juicy option. Rate that one. I've got their receivers in the buy low section, but we'll talk about that when we get there.
Same.
My buy low is actually your faller of the week, Josh Allen. 4 consecutive games of sub 17 scores in a row, so it's not looking good at all. But I still think he's definitely a QB1.
Yeah, definitely.
And I reckon right now you could get him for very, very cheap. And he's got a favourable matchup this week against Seattle. I know it's not all about short-term glory, but basically I would want to get him before this week because I think he might do pretty well there. But yeah, the offense has been pretty bad form in the last month. But if you look at how the offense has gone since the start of 2019, they've been pretty good. So you'd like to think it's just a bit of bad form and they're going to bounce back. And that will inevitably see Josh Allen bounce back to good fantasy form. John Brown's also been out. I think he played on the weekend but didn't do anything. But him coming back helps the offense because it stretches it out and just adds another receiver for the defenders to think about. Zach Moss is now back and their running game for the first time on the weekend finally did something. And yeah, the cold weather in Buffalo, I know this is a pretty weird rogue thing to take into account, but they're probably going to start running a lot more than they've been passing. But he's probably going to be a huge beneficiary of that as well because he loves a scoot out of the quarterback position. And yeah, he's still a huge rushing TD threat, as we saw on the weekend. He snagged one there. I think that's now maybe 6 for the season, maybe 5, which is what we love. We've seen Kyler been doing it week in, week out, and it's made him one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy. And yeah, he's had, in the last 3 weeks, he's had 2 matches where he's had less than 30 attempts. But that's because the game against Kansas, it was pouring down. And the game against New England, it was horrible conditions. And as I said, the weather does get worse at this time of year, but it's unlikely to be that bad every single week. So you would expect him to get back above 30 attempts a game. And yeah, for example, I checked the weather this week. It's looking good. And then they play Arizona next week, which is the desert. So it probably won't be bad there. So yeah, I think Josh Allen's definitely a buy low for me personally. Do you think that's fair, or would you just are you still a bit worried about
that's
him?
A good call. He's definitely a QB1, probably a top 8 QB still. So if you can get him for a good price, definitely do it.
Yeah. All right, sell high. Who are you going here?
I've actually gone with your man Cam Newton in my sell high.
I found this hard by the way, the sell high. I didn't even know who to go with.
Yeah, just
for this position.
Blokes that did well last week, pretty much.
Yeah, for the other positions, I didn't find it too hard, but for the QBs, I didn't think there was many. But
I found the QBs hard for every section. But yeah, Cam Newton scored 18 or something, I think, scored a rushing touchdown.
Yeah.
And I think people are still going to remember what he did in weeks 1 to 3 or whatever it was, where he was just scoring two rushing touchdowns a week, averaging 33. And I think people just value the name as well. So I mean, I think you could definitely still get quite a bit for him, and I don't think he's a QB1 going forward. So good chance to sell.
And I agree with you there. If we were in a 1 QB league, I'd be looking elsewhere than Cam Newton because there's better blokes out there. My sell high is not really a sell high. He hasn't even done that well in the last 2 weeks, but I couldn't really think of any others. But Ryan Tannehill, he had a pretty good start to the season, so his average is still quite high. But in the last 2 weeks, he's had 2 sub 20 scores, but he's still the QB8. So if you could sell them to someone, they'd still value him quite highly. But I was looking a little bit deeper into his numbers, and he has 325 plus scores, and they came against the Jags, the Bills, and the Texans, who are three have been three, you know, three poor defenses this season. And then in the next 5 weeks, he's got the Bears, the Colts, the Ravens, the Colts, and the Browns. So not an ideal fixture for Tennessee, as I keep talking about. And yeah, for me, in a QB1 league, I'd be looking to go elsewhere for him. Do you reckon anyone would cop Tannehill for Allen?
Yeah, people would cop it. I reckon I'd.
I
I
think
reckon
I
I'd
think
rather Josh
Allen's
Allen.
one spot. Yeah, I'd 100% rather Josh Allen, but I was wondering if, given that they are my buy low and sell high, I wonder if people would cop that. I think Allen is like one position above him in terms of total points, so might have to go a little bit lower than Josh Allen to get rid of him. But yeah, for me, Tanner's, yeah, I wouldn't want him. But in a QB2 league, could arguably be a buy low. So it just depends what situation you're in. So take it with a
I
grain of
reckon he's
salt.
still like probably a QB1, like right on the low end of it.
Yeah, we saw last year in tough games, he still managed to do quite well in fantasy because like rushing and he starts to throw it more. They don't have to go to Derrick Henry every time. But yeah, um,
Yeah,
that's
he's
my
pretty
sell
consistent.
high.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, running
Yeah,
backs.
cool. Buy low, Clyde Edwards-Helaire score. They played the Jets. They ran the ball about 8 times. Mahomes threw the ball about 48 times, chucked up 5 touchdowns, but they're not going to have the luxury of being able to take the piss every week against the Jets. And, Clyde is still in that unreal offense behind the beast defensive line. He's splitting with Bell, but he'll still get majority of the carries. He'll average 5 yards a carry, score a couple of touchdowns here and there. So, yeah, I think people will probably be starting to panic, especially after this week. So I reckon it's a good chance to buy low on him because I'd
Yeah,
still
I
have
think
him. He's definitely still easily a running back 2, just
yeah
outside
he'd be
that
a pretty
running back
decent
1.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah, like for me, we have quite a few people in our league. I don't know about you listeners, what your leagues are like, but a lot of people, given the amount of injury they're running back, you know, quartet or however many they have is looking pretty bad. And like I have Gaskin and Henderson who are both injured at the moment. So yeah, getting Clyde in as my RB2 would be pretty nice. Um, my buy low is, well, first of all, before I start, I just wanted to say if you're locked in playoffs, I'm not. I don't know if you think you are or not. I'd 100% start making plays for the injured guys. Talking Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Raheem Mostert, or even Miles Gaskin. I think right now, if the holders of those, I think there's 5 weeks left before the fantasy playoffs start. So if the holders of those players need a few wins, especially like Eckler, well, Gaskin less so, the other three definitely because they're on IR. So if they need wins and they need players playing now, you could definitely get them for a lot cheaper than what they're worth,
yeah,
and you can kind of start just looking at their average in terms of valuing them rather than factoring in they're not going to play this week, because if you're already in playoffs, it doesn't matter if you lose this week. So yeah, just wanted to say that. But my buy low is actually Phil Lindsay. I think we've talked about this every single episode, but Melvin Gordon is still set to face his drink driving charges, and from everything I've read, it's meant to have him receive a 3 week ban, and I think that's meant to take place after this weekend. But I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, Phil Lindsay, he hasn't been getting any receiving work, but that's because of Gordon. So when Gordon gets suspended, he'll take that. And then in his last 3 matches, Phil Lindsay, he's gone over 70 yards from scrimmage, which has basically just been rushing. And they've got, following this week, they've got the Raiders and the Dolphins. So I think there's two pretty solid scores coming up from Lindsay in those 2 matches if Gordon does get suspended. So this one is solely based on the fact that I expect Melvin to get suspended for 3 weeks. If he doesn't, then don't go for him. But yeah, right now he's probably not being started by anyone. So I think you could get him for quite low. They would probably just see him as a bench option. But yeah, I reckon he could be a pretty juicy option. I'd be keen, but sadly, the guy who owns Phil Lindsay doesn't play the game anymore. But that's okay. Who's your sell high?
Yep, sell high. I've got Kareem Hunt. He's weirdly he has not been performing at all without Nick Chubb in the team, but Nick Chubb is going to come back probably in 1 or 2 weeks. He's been listed as day to day by what's his name, their coach. He's day to day, so he's back any second. And when he comes back, Hunt's reign is going to be over. He'll still be good, but if you look on like Fantasy Pros rankings, things like that, they all still have Kareem Hunt as like the running back 6 rest of season. And if people are going to be valuing him in the top 10, I'd definitely be shipping him off, because as soon as Chubb's back, he'll be back in the RB2 range. He would
Yeah,
still be good because he was
yeah,
balling
he'll
out
still be
beforehand.
worth a start
Yeah,
probably.
but yeah, he'll be in a committee. So
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that probably that same the other guys that I mentioned before in terms of the injured players, they don't really have any RBs who are up there like Hunt is at the moment. But yeah, if you've got someone starting for them, for example, Jarek McKinnon, if you want to try and sell him for something, because in 2 weeks' time he's going to be waivers, so
yeah,
may as well get something for him. And that probably goes for all the backup RB2s. I've got this down. This is another obvious one like the injuries, but I just felt like pointing it out. If you're an owner of Giovanni Bernard, Jamal Williams, or Boston Scott, or Jarek McKinnon, I'd be trying to get them for anything this weekend, even if it's a bench player for some depth, because they're basically just going to go back into fantasy irrelevance this week or next week, depending on which team they're on. I don't know if that's, I don't know if you agree with that. Do you reckon any of them have a chance of still being fantasy relevant when their starters come back?
no, definitely not. As long as Sanders, Mixon, and Jones are playing, then they're going to be irrelevant. And Jamal's just been put on the COVID COVID
Yeah.
IR thingy, so he's cooked.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of sucks for you. I think you would have started him anyway and kept him, but if I was you, yeah, it would have been a nice sell high moment for Jamal because he probably would have done this week. So you probably could have lured people into that. But yeah, my main sell. This is a very specific one. But right now, I'd be trying to sell Alvin Kamara for Christian
Ooh,
McCaffrey. Plus, if you could get McCaffrey or even Dalvin Cook for Kamara and add something on, I would 100% do it because in my eyes, McCaffrey and Cook are arguably better than Kamara, if not level. So I think if you could get those two and then get more in, I think it's a positive trade for your side. Because I think with Thomas coming back, Sanders should be back. Callaway, I know he's only like new to the system, but he saw a bit of action the other week. Cook's now fully healthy. Their offense, their air game looks like it's starting to get back to normal a little bit, which probably should will see Kamara get less receptions. So he's still going to be one of the top options, and he's still going to be receiving, 5 or 6 times a week, but I don't think we'll see any of this like 10 or 11 reception crap that we've been seeing. So yeah, for me, it's probably a risky play because if Kamara does continue to be the RB1 and, McCaffrey comes back and he's not looking as good or something, but for me, I think it's worth the gamble if you could upgrade another position or something like that slightly, because I don't think there's much in it between Kamara and McCaffrey and even Dalvin Cook. So
yeah,
do,
I
do
rate
you,
that call. Yeah, if you
yeah,
could sell, yeah, if you could get
it's kind
McCaffrey
of
plus
what I was
more,
trying to do. Yeah, it was kind of what I was trying to do with my tight ends. I don't think I'm going to be doing it now because there's been some waivers today. But yeah, I have Gronkowski, and I was thinking of downgrading him for someone if I could improve elsewhere because I don't think, yeah, there was much between the two. But yeah, it's a risky play, but I think it's not the worst play going around. Um, all right, wide receivers.
wide receivers. Yep. So buy low. I think you're going to talk about this bloke as well, but Robbie Anderson, his average is kind of starting to fall, but he's still seeing like all the opportunity, and he's seeing more targets than DJ Moore each week. And he's only scored one touchdown the entire season, which was in round one, which took me by a huge surprise. But yeah, he's due touchdowns as well. He'll score a few more going forward, and yeah, he's definitely a buy low. Like I'd still view him as not a wide receiver one, but like bordering on it, just outside that region.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you just said. Also, brilliant thing about the two Carolina wideouts, they have great yards per reception. And we've seen with DK Metcalf, even if you're getting, well, not on the weekend, but like in the first month of the competition, even if you're getting only 7, 8, 9 targets a game, you can still be in that top echelon of receivers if you're going at like 20 yards a catch.
Yep.
But yeah, but on Thursday Night Football, just gone against the Falcons, they both went under 10 in terms of a score, but they had 8 and 6 targets respectively. That's Anderson and DJ Moore. Teddy probably had one of his weaker games, but he did miss time, and that probably just interrupted the offense in general because they had that other quarterback come in for a couple snaps, and then but CMC is going to come back. Davis had kind of started to become not so efficient on the ground, so that's probably going to improve their offense a lot. And they've got Kansas, Tampa, Detroit, and Minnesota coming up, which is probably going to suit the game script for Anderson and Moore. So yeah, I definitely think they're a buy low for sure.
Yep.
What about? I'll go my sell high. This is actually your riser of the week. Travis
Travis.
Fulgham. He's up to 86.1 rostered on. So he's not so much of a myth now, but he's still probably being underappreciated, I have to say. But in the first time he went 3 weeks of having 10 plus targets. This week he only had 7. And Jalen Rieger and Dallas Scott have both returned, and Ertz and Sanders are still to come. And after the bye this week, he's likely to face. This is if opposition teams view him as the wide receiver one. He's got Bradbury after the bye. He's got Bradbury, Denzel Ward, Seattle, which is fine, and then Jair Alexander. So if he's been doing well, I think he played one of them the other week, and he still did well. But yeah, it's not an ideal matchup for any wide receiver. So if he's viewed as the wide receiver one by those sides in real life, it might be a sell high for me. But yeah, I can see why you'd keep him because he's still producing good output. But controversial, I'd say, from myself, but I don't mind the
I
call.
reckon he could be in either category, to be honest, because if people just look at like people's averages and he's averaging like just under 20 points, then you could probably sell him high.
Yeah,
But like, yeah, I reckon he's the real deal.
do you reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he sees a lot of red zone as well, which is tasty. Who's your sell high?
My sell high is Mike Evans.
Yeah,
He's just been copping. I think he's had a niggle all year, but he's just copping like so low in terms of snaps. And now they've got Antonio Brown coming in, Godwin coming back. He'll probably be the genuine wide receiver 3, potentially rotating in and out with Mickens or Scotty Miller. So it's tough to see him. Like he'll still have games where he scores 2 shitty touchdowns, goes big, but he's not going to have consistent volume at all going forward. And
yeah,
people still view him as Mike Evans, so people will want to
yeah.
buy.
He's basically a tight end now.
Yeah,
Like it's honestly a joke. Like he gets like 3 or 4 targets and gets a touchdown. He gets 12. So yeah, I'd 100% try and sell him up. When I was talking about the Pittsburgh wide receivers, I was actually thinking about the Tampa wide receivers. They're probably in a similar situation. Everyone has their week basically where they're the leading target getter. So I probably wouldn't want any of the Tampa wideouts at the moment. But yeah, like they're all decent players, so I can get why you'd want them. But yeah, for me, they're overvalued. Tight ends, my buy low is actually Mark Andrews. We talked about him before. You were saying he was the third tight end now that Kittle's gone.
yep.
He's had 2 sub 10 scores in a row, but he is 6th in red zone targets out of all the tight ends in the competition. Coming up, they've got the Colts, the Patriots, the Titans, the Steelers, and the Cowboys. So 2 tough ones in there, the Colts and the Steelers, but then the other 3 are pretty nice for the Ravens. And realistically, this is like similar to the Buffalo Bills. You'd be expecting the Ravens to start lifting in the passing game. They've been pretty bad the last month, but they're a good team. If they're going to be any decent for playoffs, they've got to start hitting their straps in the air. So I think it's worth hedging your bets on that coming true and trying to snag Mark Andrews for low. Like I'm genuinely tempted to see if I could get Andrews for Gronk, um,
Yeah,
just because
that'd be solid.
I prefer Andrews's I just prefer his stat lines than Gronk's. But yeah, who's your buy low here?
My buy low is Dallas Goddard.
Dallas.
He came back this week, played barely any of the match because he's coming back from an injury off IR. Had like one catch for 5 yards or whatever, or one catch for 10 yards. I think he scored 2. But yeah, we all know how shit Ertz is this year, and he's still injured. Goddard's definitely their number one tight end. He was the number one tight end for the first month when they were both going at it. And like he's kind of become a bit of a myth because of the injury, and now he's just scored 2. So if you can secure him, I would, because he's definitely a tight end 1, probably potentially a top 8 tight end, given the lack of depth at the position this year.
Yeah, I think as he went on IR, he was like 6th in my rankings or something. He was right up there.
He was balling.
Yeah, I 100% back that. Once again, sadly, he's with an irrelevant owner.
Yeah,
so
mate,
we can't get him.
Quinn never checks his team in our league. He's got 3 like genuine solid tight ends.
Yeah, we've got 3 out of 10. There might even be 4 now who don't check their sides. So
it's sad.
Feel free to comment or DM the podcast on Instagram if you want to play next year. We're looking for players. All right, my sell high is probably controversial because they've been doing well the last couple of weeks, but similar. I kind of echoed the same statements with Kamara, but Cook and Gronkowski, they just rely so much on TDs. I personally don't really like it. And they've both got players to come back, which just frightens me a little bit as a fantasy owner of Gronkowski. Cook's obviously got the whole band to come back. He's got Thomas, Sanders, and Callaway, if that matters. And then Gronkowski's got Godwin to come back and Brown to come in. So, yeah, and Evans might slowly get to full health. So, yeah, for me, both of them, they're still likely to going to get touchdowns. Their offense will probably improve as the players get back. So you could look at it that way. But yeah, I just don't like their reliance on touchdowns. It kind of freaks me out because if all of a sudden they go 1 week without a touchdown, they're getting 6. So I'd rather someone who sees a bit more of the footy. Like I genuinely prefer Robert Tonyan to these two. But yeah,
not over
that's just
Gronk,
me.
Surely you're not.
I don't know. Tonyan had 7 targets on the weekend. Like that's pretty juicy. But yeah, I don't know. I'll have to compare those two because I could get some more. I could get some stuff for that. But yeah, nah. I had Gronk high in my rankings. I'm just a little bit frightened by some of the uncertain factors that are coming up in the next few weeks. Do you cop that, or do you think they're both good fantasy options still?
Well, I think Gronk is good. Like he's copying a fair share of targets, to be fair. But Cook is my sell high of the week. Exactly what you said, reliant on touchdowns. And we've watched Saints games where we've said to each other, like, is this bloke injured? Because he's just never on the field. I swear he plays like 30% of the snaps and he just comes out when they're in the red zone or whatever. And he's coming off like a decent score this week. So sell him, ship him off.
Yeah. No, I like it. See you, Jared.
It's a miracle. Oh, yeah. What about that one? Unbelievable. Balotelli. Aguero. Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle.